The content provided in this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and is not intended as a substitute for professional, medical, or mental health advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician, mental health professional, or other qualified healthcare provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical or mental health condition. Welcome to All Start, where we share our story, listen with compassion, and connect through our faith and mental health experiences. Following this story, Morgan and I will offer insights that connect faith and mental health. We invite you to practice listening and understanding during this episode so that when someone shares their story with you in real time, you'll be ready. So take a deep breath, settle in, and let's start this journey together.
My name is Nick, and I'll start. Sharing your story can be scary, I think just because it's hard to know where to place boundaries. It's hard to know what to share with others in different settings. And I think oftentimes I can come back after sharing and think like, oh man, I overshared. I shouldn't have said that. There's moments where I wish I could take something back. But the reality is I think it's just the recoil from being vulnerable. At the heart of that, there's something I've grown to believe over the years that tells me that I'm not good enough. And so there's a sense of having to acquire value. And I think there's a process of saving face or putting on a mask. And if I show others what's behind the mask, then I've lost control of that. And that's scary for me. I can think back to like middle school. I remember one morning getting up and getting ready for school and just having like a little bit of like this breakdown moment with my mom. And I was like, every day is the same, and just the monotony of the time of the year it was. I think it was winter, and it was just like, you go to school, you come home, you do homework, and it's cold and dark, and that was hard for me. And I remember, I was playing sports, and it was just like the whole day was taken up by these activities, and it was just the same day over and over. Another thing that comes to mind is when I was a senior in high school, I started getting these stomach aches, and these stomach aches would sometimes become like I would notice that my chest getting tight or my back getting tight, and I remember I would just have like a friend at school like, hey, can you pop my back? Like I just feel tense, and I just thought it was like I'm sore from like football practice or whatever it was. And so I remember like talking to my mom about this, and I was so unaware of like what was going on that I remember her asking me questions, like trying to help me figure out like, well, where does your stomach hurt? And I didn't know. It's just like my stomach, it hurts. Like, yeah, it hurts everywhere. Yeah. So senior in high school, and I think looking back, I can kind of recognize through patterns in my life that it was definitely a sense of being out of control, that I was about to graduate. I loved high school. I was about to say goodbye to friends. That was really hard for me. And then the unknown. There's something so exciting about the unknown for me, but at the same time, there's something that creates a sense of anxiety. I've come to learn that, and then there's moments in life that remind me that I'm not really in control. And when that happens, I fight for it, and that induces anxiety. So it was that summer between graduating high school and going to college. My youth group took a trip up to Chicago for graduating seniors. And so I'm up there with 6, 7 friends and my youth minister. And I think far more than what I realized, I was feeling the stress of not knowing what the next semester was going to look like. And just like, man, I just committed to like this school and pursuing ministry, and is this really what God has for me? But it was easy enough to ignore. However, it was clearly always with me. I'm not sure really what like triggered this, but we are like right in front of the Mac store, like on like the very center of downtown, and I remember like I just started crying, just out of nowhere, just started crying. And so all my friends were like, what is going on? Like we were just having fun joking around, and I'm like bawling, and my muscles started getting really tense, and my hands almost like my fingers tips like curling in to my fingers, to my palms of my hands, and then my elbows, and my arms just curled in on themselves up to my chest. And it was like just everything had gotten tight, and like I was like kind of keeled over, and I ended up getting sick right there. So all this was incredibly embarrassing. Chicago was big enough that it felt like everyone was around me, but enough's going on that no one really noticed. But this moment that I was embarrassed, I wish like I was alone for this, and just like shame, and just like my friends are wondering what's going on, and it's like I don't know where this came from. And I'm thankful that my youth minister, I guess he also had to some degree struggle with anxiety enough to recognize this moment. And so he took me into the restroom of the Mac store, which again was also like, I don't want to be here right now in this very busy store. But we went into the bathroom, and I got some cold water in my face and kind of calmed down and talked with him. And that was the first moment that was like, no, this isn't like, I don't just need my back popped. So I was experiencing some pretty intense anxiety. Okay, so now I have a name for it. And that is incredibly helpful. I didn't really realize that the way I think is going to influence my body this much. But I'm graduating from college. I was moving to Arizona for an internship. So this was like a big move for me because I lived all my life in Central Illinois, which again was like, I was so excited for that. I wanted that. I wanted some adventure and some change. But at the same time, like this caused anxiety. So I moved to Arizona, and I'd say for, the initial few months of being there, I was doing great. I had committed to be there for a year. And I'd say towards the end of that year, I started feeling anxious again. I remember being at work, and my chest being tight, my back being tight, and just being in discomfort. And I'd find myself like kind of squirming in the chair when I'd sit, or, having to like get up and take a walk really quick. And I just graduated from college at this point, and I'm looking to see, is staying in Arizona an option for me? Is coming back home, getting a job closer to my family somewhere in the Midwest an option? So I'm looking at a few different potentials. And I think the level of uncertainty and loss of control, or the feeling of control, the loss of feeling of control, was very difficult for me. I had created a comfort in feeling like I was in control. So I ended up committing to stay a little bit longer. And again, it was like, okay, I was enjoying life, and like things were good. But the time came that I made the decision to come back to Illinois. I was excited to come back. But at that point, I'd stayed in Arizona long enough that I was like, but I also want to be here. And so coming home, not having a plan of what was next, and like wondering if I'd made a mistake was so difficult. On top of like the 25-hour drive from Phoenix, I'm not sure how long it is really, but long. And I just felt so trapped. And I don't know, that drive was incredibly difficult. There was moments where I was just like, would just stop just to get out to move, not because my body needed it, because it was like my mind needed to let out some energy itself. Following the move back from Arizona, I'd moved to Indianapolis, and I would say over the next maybe 2 years there, I continued to struggle on almost seasonally with anxiety. It would seem that winters would be more difficult, but I would say transitions were really the biggest. Triggers for experiences that I'd have. I had received an opportunity to go out to Rhode Island to help with a church plant. Had always been a dream of mine, and so I'm like trying to make this decision, and it was difficult. I remember my boss noticing this and just kind of seeing, like, I think just the way I would be tense and the way I would move in meetings and just like adjusting my shoulders, or he could just see that I was in discomfort. And so he, in a meeting one day, just him and I, he's like, hey, how are you doing? What's going on? I'm noticing this. And which is cool, because I think so many people would be hesitant to be that direct, but this was really like he was throwing me a lifeline. He knew, I think he experienced this himself, and so he's like, I'm seeing that in you. And he got me connected to a local counselor, and this is the first time I ever had met with anyone, and I only met for 3 sessions, but I learned a lot. And I think for myself, I think becoming more aware of what's going on in myself was incredibly helpful. I don't think that's what everyone needs, but for me it was like there was this power in knowledge and being able to name something and then move from there. It was like I almost was given a game plan for the first time. And I think one of the first things that really kind of clicked for me was this counselor I was working with walked me through, okay, there are only certain things you can control. Let's name these things. And we have our thoughts, our feelings, and our actions. Outside of that, you're fighting for things that you can't control. And so I'm beginning at this point to realize I'm really struggling to trust. And so there's this spiritual deepening. I am learning that I need to trust God with these things. That I'm limited, but God is not. I'd been dating my now wife for about a year at that point, and she was planning to go to Tanzania to spend the summer there, and my great uncle had just passed away. And so my dad approached me and was like, hey, we have the home now, where my uncle was living. And he was like, what would it look like if you bought this from us? And he's like, if not, do you think Peyton would want to stay here when she comes back from Tanzania? And so I remember Mother's Day over at her parents' place, and celebrating her mom. But the entire time I'm there, I'm thinking through do I want to marry this girl? I think if I take this next step, it's I need to be at a point where it's I'm committed. And so I'm processing my uncle passing away, potentially buying this home, and do I want to marry Peyton? And so for about 2 weeks, it was all of those things returned. I thought I had beaten anxiety, but it was all back. And it was it prevented me from living everyday life. It was can I go to the grocery store? Can I make the 5-minute drive there? Because I'm struggling. Can I make it through the day at work? I'm going to take a sick day today. So it was about 2 weeks that was just interfered with life. So I called a counselor, and I sat down with them, and we began probably a year journey again of just kind of working through things together. We're digging things up that I didn't realize was an issue. I came to realize as pastor, as counselor, as husband, as friend, son, brother, I will never be at my best if I don't address these things. And really like my view of God has changed in so many ways, and really both like breadth and depth. That's just like I see God everywhere, but also the depth of how I see God is extended. Throughout the process, it was not always something that I was thankful for. It was difficult at times to say like praise God, or I know God's present, because anxiety led to some hopelessness, which led to depression. And I think in those dark moments, I think the most tragic thing that occurred for me is that there were moments that I completely lost any sense of like value for self. And so I think I always recognized God's worth, but there was almost like a need to apologize for myself. There was so much redemption needed for truly understanding what it means to place your identity in God. And so, to varying degrees, when there are difficulties or there are mental health stressors, I can say praise God because I know you're present, and I know there's fruit in this, that there's hope, and on the other end you are working in me, and on the other end there is good.
Welcome back to another post-story discussion of I'll Start. I'm your host, Heather Kolopek, a licensed clinical social worker and mental health therapist, and I'm here with my co-host, Bible scholar, and dear friend, Morgan Arsenault.
Thanks, Heather. Hello, everyone. We are so glad that you're here. Nick's story gives us a lot to reflect on, and today we're going to look at it from both a psychological and faith-based perspective, and there is a lot to unpack. So let's dive in.
Okay. Well, so Nick's story, it highlights something that we don't always talk about when it comes to anxiety, and that is how much anxiety shows up in our bodies. So even before we have conscious thoughts of fear or panic, our bodies are already reacting. Sometimes they whisper through, signals like tension, headaches, or fatigue. Or other times they shout with tightness in our chest, or digestive issues, or physical pain during a panic attack. And what comes to mind to me is, people who go to the emergency room thinking they're having a heart attack because of that physical pain, and then are told, hey, you're having you're having a panic attack.
Yeah. And, looking back at Nick's story, he had that back pain, he needed to pop his back and that discomfort. And then also, that moment where his hands, like his muscles just started curling inward, and his body is, saying, hey, like I need some attention, something's going on. And I think that's relatable. It may not be in the form of a panic attack, but I think we've all had those moments where our body knows something before we do, and we even before we can understand it.
Yeah, and that brings us to a word that we haven't defined yet on this podcast, and that's somatic. It comes from the Greek word soma, meaning body. And in therapy, we talk about somatic work by really paying attention to our thoughts, our emotions, and those life experiences, and how they're stored and expressed in the body. So, our body carries our stories, especially those ones that are shaped by stress and trauma. So instead of only analyzing, what's going on in our minds, we're also listening to what the body is saying in this kind of therapy work. And often it's been, our body has been trying to speak to us for a really long time. And when we finally tune into that, it can guide us, not in a way that's scary, but in a way that's really honest. And I see this in my therapy sessions a lot with people where they come in not recognizing what they're feeling. And as soon as I observe their body, and I might point out, well, you're wringing your hands right now, or I see you're shaking your foot, or, you seem out of breath as you're talking about that. When they start to notice the physical experience, they start to recognize, oh, wow, I guess I am anxious. Okay.
That framework, that's so helpful. And, I wrestle with that because from a faith perspective, it kind of, there's a little bit of tension, right? Because scripture talks about, the desires of the flesh and the tension that's between the spirit and the flesh. Like in Galatians, it says, walk by the spirit and you will not gratify the desires of the flesh. And in Matthew, Jesus, he says, he speaks boldly about the parts of your body or the parts of ourselves that lead to sin, cut them off. So when we say listen to your body, we don't mean, do whatever feels good or follow every impulse. We are not talking about indulging temptation. We are talking about honoring the body as a meaningful part of how we experience life and how we experience healing.
Exactly. This isn't about letting the body lead us blindly or anything like that. It's about recognizing that God designed our bodies with care and intention. And scripture tells us, we're made in the image of God. We are his workmanship. And the Spirit of God dwells in us, not just in our thoughts, not just in our prayers, but in our whole being. And that includes our body.
Yes. And even when we look at Jesus, Jesus is God in a human body. The Word became flesh, and Jesus felt hunger and stress and love and pain. And, after the resurrection, Jesus, he didn't erase the wounds that he had. He showed them, and his body is a part of his story. And that tells us something powerful. And I believe that our bodies matter.
Absolutely. Our bodies do matter. And, if you're listening right now and noticing any anxiety in your body, maybe, you're tight in your shoulders or you have a heavy sort of sensation in your chest, I'm just going to invite you to take a moment with us here. I just want you to gently place a hand on that part of your body. No pressure, just an awareness. You're not pressing. You're just going to place your hand there. And I want you to take a slow breath in and out. And just notice, does anything shift? Even a little? Is there a softening or just a bit more space or awareness? And now ask yourself gently, where does my body feel most at ease? Maybe it's a memory that comes up or a place or even a small moment of stillness that you've experienced. What helps you return there? Let your body be a part of that answer. And as I think about this in my own experience, I shared in episode 3 about my experience with anxiety and ADHD, primarily how anxiety and ADHD kind of go together, and even depression. And so I was thinking about this with my body. One of the first signs that I'm super stressed, my anxiety or my ADHD is really, really high, is I start to clench my jaw. And then over nighttime, I start to grind my teeth. And then that tension kind of builds in my muscles, and it can lead to migraines.
Ooh.
And so I'm one of those people where I just kind of go, and I'm not recognizing how stressed out I am. So when I start clenching my jaw and grinding my teeth, that's a first indication, hey, maybe I need to slow down here, take a step back, rest a little more, calm my body, stop, get off the treadmill here of life, and take some calm before this turns into a major migraine that is going to, knock me out for 3 days. So listening to my body and noticing that tendency for me to start clenching my jaw or grinding my teeth at night, it's an opportunity for me to do something different and to listen to what my body is telling me that I'm stressed. I don't know if you have any.
For me, mine is in my chest, and it will either be a nervousness and then for me, that just, I start thinking about all the things that need to be done or what haven't been done yet. And it's, it's just, but it's like something scary is about to happen almost, or like if you're about ready to go on stage to present something, like it's that type of nervousness, but it's, I'm at home with my kids, it's not, there's nothing to be nervous about. And so that has been an indicator for me to like, okay, what is this, to like stop and think about. And then also I still feel it in my chest, but it's more of a heaviness that, something just isn't sitting right. And, it can lead to me having all of these, kind of the same thought patterns of, well, this needs to be done, or you said this wrong, or all those types of things. And so it's becoming more of a moment to pause. Okay, why is this happening? What do I need to work through? So
That's so good. That's such great awareness.
And this is fascinating to me because so my undergrad degree is athletic training and exercise science. So I have studied the body, but I have never thought of it, or I've actually never heard of it as a storyteller, and like this idea that the body can hold our stories and also hold trauma. But it makes sense because, our body is how we experience everything. We do experience grief, joy, fear, love. Our emotions are a part of our body. And in many faith spaces, we focus so much on the mind and the spirit, which is important, but we forget that our bodies carry wisdom too.
Yeah, and that's such a shift, I think, in awareness, right? We're just creating a better balance between the mind and the spirit and the body. We're not saying that one is more important than the other. We're saying this needs to be in balance. And, it's the body isn't just tagging along on our experience. I like to think of it, sometimes people say like, oh, I'm just like in this meat suit. It's like, the body isn't just tagging along. It's been narrating our journey all along. It's been here with us since the moment we were put in our mother's wombs. We haven't always known how to listen to it.
Yeah. And, if our body is where we carry pain, it has to be a part of the way that we find our peace as well.
Yeah, that's so important because, healing doesn't just happen in our thoughts. It happens when we feel safe in our skin again, when we can, breathe a little deeper, when we can rest a little easier and reconnect with ourselves in a really gentle and grounded way.
That is such a great reminder for all of us. We want to say thank you again for being with us today. We hope that this has opened up space for you to get curious about your own experience, and to trust that your body and your story and your spirit, they all matter to God.
Yes. And before we go, we just want to say thank you. We at All Start, we reached 1,000 downloads this week, and we're so grateful.
Yes.
So to every listener who has tuned in, who has shared an episode or told a friend, thank you so much. We see God's hand in every step of this journey, and I'm truly blown away. And we're just getting started. So keep listening, keep sharing, and we'll see you next time on I'll Start.